Welcome back, you guys. And today I'm going to address a question that I've gotten a whole lot recently on some of the shorts and some of the videos around this, the Protection Group Denmark ARCH Gen III ballistic helmet. In the market, there's a ton of options out there for ballistic helmets, from the top names like Opscore, Team Wendy, M-Tek, Galvion, right? And then there's also some lesser known names out there that you should probably avoid and probably stay away from, because if it seems too good to be true, then it probably is. And you certainly get what you pay for, especially when it comes to ballistic protection. And I would argue that there's no piece of personal protection equipment, PPE, more vital than what you're putting on your noggin. So whether it's a bump or a ballistic, I would recommend buying name brand because of the reliability factor and just understanding what you're getting into, the pros and cons of bump versus ballistic. That's not what this video is. That's just a little piece of advice as somebody who spent a lot of time looking at cheaper alternatives and ultimately decided on going with my very first helmet was a Hardhead Veterans. Wouldn't necessarily recommend that after the user experiences I've had. Moved on to a Team Wendy bump, which I would recommend for a bump helmet. But today we're going to talk about my end user experience with the Protection Group Denmark ARCH Gen III, the ballistic helmet. They did send this out to me. Full disclosure, get the biases out of the way. The helmet itself was sent to me for free. I did pay for the cover myself. Everything else on here, came from other various means and ways. So PGD did send me the helmet. Just for those of you guys that want to know that stuff up front, if you think there's some kind of bias here. I do have some pros, I do have some cons to this helmet, but I wanted to take a look back now that it's been about 6 months of me running this and give you guys, the potential end users out there, the potential consumers out there, a little bit of insight around my experiences, what I like and what I don't like about this helmet. So with that said, let's go ahead and let's jump into the discussion. Okay guys, so talking about ballistic helmets in general for a second. When we look at most of the legacy offerings out there on the market today, you have to kind of evaluate a couple different things. One is the cut of the helmet. So helmets like what you're seeing here are pretty common. This has become, in a lot of ways, the new norm for many of us, especially on the civilian and law enforcement side, which is a high cut helmet. High cut meaning that there's a cutaway here that's going to open up and expose your ear pro and your ears and things. And that's just generally more attractive because of the different options it provides you for your ear pro. Military guys, sorry, a lot of you guys are still issued ACHs and things that are not quite as awesome, or maybe even the I-hips, which is really unfortunate, very ugly to look at, but probably very serviceable all the same. Now, when I was looking into ballistic helmets, I know there's a lot of options out there, particularly the brands everybody jumps to are Opscore and Team Wendy. Those legacy offerings do fall in line from a weight perspective with the PGD ARCH Gen III here. Now, when you're evaluating weight on a helmet, something to keep in mind is that typically when you look at the product pages, you get two sets of weights. You get a shell weight, which is literally just the shell of the helmet. So if you strip off all the screws, the rails, the harness, the pads, the bracket up front for mounting night vision, that's what your shell weight is. And then when you go ahead and you add in the weight of your hardware, your rails, the screws, the liner system and your suspension setup, and yes, your shroud up front for night vision, that's the overall weight that you're looking at. And when we take a look at the ARCH Gen III, it comes in right around 3 pounds. It might be like literally a couple tenths over 3 pounds, but that does fall in line with the discussion with Opscore's legacy offerings. Now they just dropped a new one that is very lightweight, and that's great because it saves on your neck and your back and things, especially if you're somebody in a law enforcement capacity or a military capacity, where you're wearing helmets for several hours, on end, and that really takes a toll, not, in the immediate, but years and years down the line, where your back's all jacked up, your neck, you lose mobility and things like that. So when I was evaluating weight, looking at this, trying to see, is this something I want to run long-term? Yes, it was sent to me for free, but is it something I really want long-term? This falls in line with that. I don't know that for the money, you're going to find anything better as a consumer. 3 pounds isn't terrible. Yes, there are lighter options on the market. You do pay for that. And one of the things that I do like about Protection Group Denmark is I reached out, had a great conversation with Nolan, who is their guy here on the US side of things. And they do have a US store, by the way. So if at the end of this, you guys are looking to buy one of these, you can go ahead and pick one up at their US site. You can use discount code PMP to save you guys a little bit of money. When I was talking to Nolan about the helmet, what you get with the lighter weight is usually a sacrifice in your back face deformation, meaning that if this helmet were to take a round, how much of an indent would be caused, therefore how much trauma would make it through to your noggin. And on the lighter helmets, that's usually where the sacrifice comes in. Yes, it's a lighter system, but overall you are sacrificing to some degree a level of protection. Now, I'm not saying that that means that the legacy helmets or even that this helmet is a better choice than something like the M-Tek offerings or the new lightweight Opscore helmet. I'm simply saying that you need to do your research and understand the testing that goes into helmets, because the NIJ rating, which all companies seem to advertise their helmets for, they're tested to that standard, but it is not like an approval, because there really isn't a true testing and evaluation for helmets. They just run it against the NIJ standard for soft armor, basically, and apply it to this. So that's why most ballistic helmets are rated for handgun rounds up to like 44 Magnum, but rifle rounds not so much on most helmets. I know there's a couple in the market that are breaking into that realm, from companies like Opscore, from companies like Team Wendy. So running this from a weight perspective, from a protection perspective, this falls in line again with a lot of the legacy offerings in the market. So that for me is a big win. And also when you look at the overall aesthetic, the overall contour of the helmet, am I losing anything? Am I gaining anything? The shell shape and the cut and everything, and I'll drop an image here, actually does line up pretty well with some of the Opscore options out there. So if you're looking for just a side-by-side comparison, because guys, we all want to be confirmed in our biases, and we want to evaluate and we want to compare to make sure that what we're doing makes sense for us. So this actually does, the cut lines up very, very closely, as do many, on the market, but very closely with the Opscore. So with that, I felt pretty good about it just from an outside evaluation standpoint. Now, when we're talking about my end user experiences, I have to first talk about the inside of the helmet. I have to talk about the padding. The suspension system, I will just say, is about the same as what you're gonna get in a Team Wendy. I know a lot of guys will drop the money to go buy specific Team Wendy branded BOA retention systems. I like the Team Wendy system. I really like this one for a couple reasons. So when you click it in, you can tighten this down, and that's gonna obviously make that fit tighter to your head. However, this features on their BOA where you can crank it backwards and you can loosen it without having to pop it out, lose all tension, pop it back in, and start all over again. So that's a small feature, but that's a big thing when you're out in the field trying to adjust your gear and your pads and everything, is you can't just tighten it. You can tighten it and you can loosen it. But the padding system in here is really where this helmet shines. And I did, full disclosure, I tried other pads. I did swap in, I ordered the Team Wendy padding system, and I was pretty convinced that I needed some better padding because of the fitment of this helmet for a while. I thought it was a little bit loose. I thought it was something where it was a little bit too much movement on my head, because the helmet that I had worn previously, the bump helmet from Team Wendy, which is the X-Fil, I believe, it didn't move because there wasn't a lot of weight up there. It's just a plastic shell with some pretty firm padding. This is a much heavier shell because it's a ballistic helmet, obviously, and there was a little bit more movement without the chin strap, without the ear pro. But looking objectively at the padding, it is far more comfortable. It's memory foam, and it conforms to your head very well. There's also 10 pads that come with it, so you can position this around your head pretty much any way you need to fit whatever shape noggin you got going on. My head is very large, so I was able to move the pads around so that I have more coverage around the crown of my head, not necessarily the top, and accommodate that. I also know I was able to help John out with a different brand helmet where he was able to mix and match some of the pads from Protection Group Denmark with the factory padding that came with his helmet for a very, very comfortable fit. I would be very surprised, and as somebody who has tried to find a better padding solution, you're not going to get better than this, guys. I really don't think you will. In fact, I know there's some companies out there that you pay a ton of money for and have really uncomfortable padding. These pads are outstanding, and I know they're actually working on improving these to meet some other goals and things that they have for the product line and for the helmet. But honestly, I've spent hours out in this. The only downside I will say here, and this is for you guys that live up here in the great Midwest or any of the northern states where it gets very, very cold. We did go out for a night shoot in January. It got down to about 19 degrees. And even just having this sitting on my kit in the back of my Jeep for about 10-ish minutes while I was, layering up and putting on my carrier and my belt and everything, these pads got rock hard in the cold. So I kind of had to force it onto my head and then wait for the body heat that naturally escapes through your melon to kind of reheat and reshape these pads. Now, after that, about 25 minutes of wearing it like that, they recontoured, they reformed to my head. I think I gave it another couple clicks with the BOA back here, and I was in really, really good shape, wore it for several hours. Honestly, I really do love the comfort behind this thing, as long as it's set up appropriately. And speaking of setup, we do have a counterweight pouch back here. A lot of times people will talk about helmets of any brand and variety and say it's uncomfortable, and sometimes it is, but a lot of times it comes down to configuring your pads to help you be comfortable, as well as your counterweights. So you guys can see I have my MH1s up here. So shout out to my friends at Custom Night Vision and Low Light Innovations. And then on the back side here, I do have this 3D printed battery pack, which is not a battery pack with a cable. It just holds batteries, but the weight of the batteries, those act as my counterweight. So you guys can see this is pretty well balanced. It's a little bit leaning forward is what it feels like. So then when I drop the tubes down here, it evens out a little bit. That's a pretty balanced setup, and it's really, really comfortable for me. Now, what I will say about the night vision mount up front is it is worth, in my opinion, the upgrade to the Unity shroud, which is an option you can get direct from the factory, direct from the PGD website. They do have a default plastic shroud if you want to save yourself the $65, but personally, I like knowing that I have a metal shroud up front. And after talking with Nolan at PGD, again, their plastic shroud actually is stronger than it gets credit for, but I think all of us just like that extra peace of mind. We want to have that metal shroud there. We want to have that, and it's worth the extra $60, especially when you consider that some of the options out there are breaking into hundreds of dollars just for the shroud, and then you have to install it yourself. The last piece here that I will talk about is the rails. So this is their variation of the ARC rail, and I don't remember what ARC stands for, but it's the same kind of technology that's used on the Opscore helmets, and now a lot of the Team Wendy helmets. It's pretty much become the industry standard. I know I've read a lot of feedback and reports that people have problems with the amp arms popping out. I think they talked about that on the Dirty Civilian video that just recently popped, talking about helmets, or dropped rather, and I don't run amp arms, so I really haven't had that issue. I do run the 3M Peltor mounts here that pop in and out, and these have been fantastic for me. I haven't had any issues with this. They've not popped off the ARC rails at all. And I know that after reading a lot on Reddit and things, there are some QC changes that, if I'm understanding correctly, that were put in place to help address some of those quality and fitment issues on the ARC rail. So I've not had any issues with it. I understand some people may have in the past, but I also understand that they're working really, really hard to address that so that you can use some common accessories like the rotating flashlights, the amp arms, things like that. But I, again, have not had any problems with my Ear Pro. From an end user perspective, this has been, like I said, very comfortable. And really, guys, like I said, mine was sent to me for free, but as a consumer, somebody who's trying to get the most bang for their buck, looking at whatever threats and considerations that I'm dealing with, which is mostly probably going to be shrapnel and overpressure, not necessarily direct rounds to the noggin. For the price point, and these things still come in right around $650, which you're paying over $500 in most cases for a bump helmet from some brands these days. So just something to think about when you're out there shopping for a helmet. Now, if you're, loyal to a brand and you just have to have a certain helmet, then I can't help you guys. But I do get a lot of questions on this. Do you still like it? Is it still comfortable? Are you still happy with it? And to all of those, I would say, yeah, I love it. The biggest points of critique for me are the padding in the cold. I do wish the padding was just a little bit tighter to my head, but I do fall at the very bottom of their largest size. So in some aspects, there's only so much you can do with it. And like I said, they are working on additional padding solutions to address some other goals they have as a company. And there's a lot more behind testing than just the NIJ component. I will say that. If you guys look into some of the data and testing requirements for the FBI DEA protocol, you'll know that there's some places where the brands that we consider to be the very best, like Opscore and Team Wendy, actually fall short, and companies many of us haven't heard of before, like Bush Protective or even maybe Protection Group Denmark, perhaps exceed what they're looking for. So as with all things we talk about here, it's really important to do your research. I have no problem recommending this to people for the money, for the performance, and for the customer service and support. I think it's a fantastic value and a great product. Not just saying that because they sent it out to me. I wouldn't have any problem spending my own money out of pocket on one of these helmets after having put 6 months in with it. In fact, I would actually feel a little bit goofy if I had spent $1,000 on a used Opscore when I could have gotten a brand new one of these. With a better padding system and potentially a better suspension system if you really like the BOA, which I do. You know, I could have saved that money and invested it in some of the other stuff that you see on here, like the Faro battery pouch, like the Ear Pro and things like that. So this has been outstanding for me. I really enjoy it. And if you guys are looking for more testimonial on Protection Group Denmark, I usually don't steer folks towards Reddit, but if you guys know, you know, there's some shady stuff going on with a couple of companies that were dealing their helmets. PGD, they did the right thing, man. They went out there, they dumped a public discount code to help folks save money on buying a new helmet when one of the distributors was not fulfilling orders and taking people's money, which is super based and a great move for the community. So like I said, I love this helmet. I've had nothing but a positive experience with it, and I have absolutely no issues recommending this to anybody who is in the market for ballistic protection here. Yeah, that's all. I think that's all I got. If you guys have questions on this, please drop them in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. We'll catch you on the next one.